The key shouldn't fit. Sister Catherine knew that, had known it for 16 years. But at 2 a.m., standing in the corridor where no one should be, her hand was already turning it. The brass felt warm against her palm, as if it had been waiting all this time, as if it knew this moment would come. The lock clicked, not stuck, not rusted, not fighting her. Someone had been oiling it. Catherine's breath caught in her throat. She pushed the door open slowly, the hinges moving silently, too silently for a door that should have been sealed for over a decade. The room was smaller than she remembered, just 10 feet square, with no windows, no ventilation. The air smelled of old candle wax and something else, something like memory itself. Inside, on the single shelf mounted against the far wall, a blue envelope. Her name, written in her own handwriting, postmarked yesterday. Catherine's legs nearly gave out. She gripped the doorframe, her knuckles white. This wasn't possible. She'd buried this room in her mind, locked away the memories, thrown the key into the deepest well of her consciousness, and filled it with prayers and silence. But the room hadn't buried her, and now it was calling her back. Catherine had taken her vows at St. Mary's Convent when she was 23 years old. Young, too young, her mother had said, standing in the kitchen of their small Portland apartment, dish towel clutched in her hands like a lifeline. "You're not running toward God, Catherine. You're running from something." She was right, of course. Mothers always are. But Catherine came anyway, because sometimes running from something is the only way to survive it. Because the walls of St. Mary's promised silence, structure, safety, everything the outside world had failed to give her. The convent had rules, clear ones, unbreakable ones. No personal mail without approval from Mother Superior. No locked rooms except for storage and archives. No keys except what Mother Superior distributed each morning during prayers, collected each evening during Vespers. This key, the one that now burned in Catherine's pocket like a hot coal, came from somewhere else, from a past that wasn't supposed to have keys anymore. 3 days ago, while cleaning out Sister Margaret's cell after she passed, Catherine found it, taped inside an old prayer book, wedged between Psalm 23 and a prayer to the Virgin Mary. The pages were yellowed, soft with age and countless readings, but the key was bright, well-kept, purposeful. With it, a note in Margaret's shaking handwriting, the tremor that had started last year, the one she'd insisted was nothing. "Room for B, when you're ready to remember." Margaret had been her mentor for all these years, her shield against the storms no one else could see, the sister who sat beside her during the dark nights when prayer felt like shouting into an empty canyon, the only one who knew why Catherine really came to St. Mary's. And Margaret had kept this secret for 16 years, 16 years of silence between them, of knowing glances across the chapel, of shared pain that neither dared to name. Catherine's hands trembled as she pulled the envelope from the shelf. It wasn't old, wasn't yellowed like the documents in the convent archives. Fresh, new. The paper still had that crisp feeling. The ink still smelled faintly of the post office. Someone had placed it there this week, while Margaret laid dying in the hospital, while Catherine held her cold hand and whispered prayers she wasn't sure anyone heard, while the world pretended everything was normal. Her chest tightened until breathing felt impossible. The postmark, she recognized the city immediately, the way you recognize the face of someone who hurt you years ago. Portland, the city she'd left behind, the city she'd sworn never to think about again, the city where everything began and ended on the same rainy October night, 16 years ago. Inside the envelope, a single photograph, a boy, maybe 15 years old, dark hair that fell across his forehead in a way that made her heart stop, green eyes that felt like looking into a mirror, and on the back, in handwriting that made her knees buckle, "He asks about you." Catherine's breath caught. The photograph slipped from her fingers, falling to the wooden floor where it landed face up. Those green eyes staring at the ceiling, at nothing, at everything. She'd promised. She'd signed papers, legal papers with official seals and witness signatures. Closed adoption, no contact, ever, never, not in this lifetime. That was the deal she'd made. That was how she survived the unsurvivable. But someone had broken it, and they'd done it here, inside the one place she thought was safe, inside these walls that promised sanctuary from the world she'd left behind. Catherine didn't sleep that night. By morning prayer, her eyes burned with exhaustion. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking, no matter how tightly she clasped them together. She watched the other sisters file into the chapel, their faces serene, their movements practiced, Sister Anne, always first, her devotion absolute. Sister Teresa, humming softly under her breath. Mother Beatrice at the front, her silver hair perfectly arranged beneath her habit, her eyes seeing everything. Someone here knew. Someone was watching. After breakfast oatmeal and silence, the way it always was, Catherine went back to room for B. Her heart pounded as she turned the key again, pushed open the door. The envelope was gone. Her stomach dropped like a stone into dark water. She'd left it on the shelf. She was certain of it. She remembered setting it down, remembered her hands shaking, remembered closing the door behind her. Now nothing. Just the empty shelf and the smell of candle wax. Someone was watching. Someone knew she'd been here. That afternoon, another envelope appeared, not in room for B this time. On her pillow. Catherine found it when she returned to her cell after afternoon prayers. Blue, like the first one, but thicker, heavier. Inside, a letter written in careful, young handwriting. Dear Catherine, my name is Daniel. I'm 15 years old. For my whole life, I was told my birth mother didn't want me, that she was too young, too scared, too broken to keep me. I believed that story because what else could I do? But last month, while my dad was at work, I found papers in his desk, hidden under old tax returns and insurance documents, papers with your name on them, this address, and something else. A note from you, written the day I was born. It said, I'm not strong enough to be your mother, but I'll pray for you every single day, every morning, every night, forever. I've read that note 100 times, 1,000 times. I carry it in my pocket now, folded so small it fits against my heart. Catherine's vision blurred. Tears she hadn't allowed herself to cry in 16 years suddenly right there, hot against her cheeks. She'd written that note in the hospital, alone in that sterile room with its 2 bright lights and the sound of other babies crying through the walls. The adoption agent had promised it would be sealed, destroyed, even, but Daniel had it. The letter continued, I don't know if you kept that promise. I don't know if you thought about me at all after that day, but I'm here now, in Portland, where I've always lived, and I think you're the reason my dad brought me to St. Mary's last week. He said we were visiting family, but we don't have family here. I think he wanted me to see you. I think he knows something he's not telling me. Catherine's hands crushed the paper, her fingers leaving wrinkles across Daniel's careful words. Last week, visitors had come last week. She remembered now. A father and son tour of the convent. She'd been in the garden, deadheading roses, her back to the main building. She'd seen them from a distance to figures walking with Mother Beatrice, listening to her explanation of the convent's history. She'd thought nothing of it at the time, but Mother Beatrice had stared. Catherine remembered catching her gaze across the garden. The look had lasted too long, meant too much. And when Catherine had asked later, casually, who the visitors were, no one important, except they were. Except they were everything. That evening, Catherine found Mother Beatrice in her office. The door was open, as it always was during the hours before Vespers. An invitation and a warning. I need to ask you something. Beatrice looked up slowly from her papers. Her eyes were kind, but knowing. They'd always been knowing. About the boy. Catherine's throat closed. The words came out broken, barely a whisper. You knew. Beatrice set down her pen with precise care. I've always known. Catherine, the world tilted Margaret told me, years ago, when you first arrived at St. Mary's, you were so young, so desperate for sanctuary. She asked me to protect you, to give you space to heal, to never speak of it unless you did first. Catherine grabbed the edge of the desk, her legs suddenly unreliable. Why didn't you? Because it wasn't my story to tell. It was yours, and Margaret's. And when you were ready, I knew you'd find your way to the truth. Beatrice stood, moved to the window where the last light of evening painted the garden gold. But last week a man came. He stood in this office and told me his son had questions about his birth mother. He said the adoption agency gave him this address, said you'd signed a waiver years ago, allowing contact if the child ever asked. Catherine's knees buckled. She gripped the desk harder, her nails digging into the wood. I never signed. You did. Beatrice turned, her face soft with compassion. The day you took your vows, Margaret witnessed it. She told me you were ready to forgive yourself, that if he ever came looking, you wanted him to find you. You wanted him to know you'd never forgotten. No, that wasn't possible. Catherine didn't remember signing anything like that. She'd been so young, so desperate to erase everything that came before the convent. Margaret must have slipped it in with the other papers. The vows, the renunciations, the promises to God. Margaret must have believed Catherine would want this someday. But Margaret was wrong. Where is he now? Catherine's voice barely worked. Beatrice's face softened even more, if that was possible. Downstairs, in the visiting room. He's been waiting for 2 hours. Catherine stood outside the visiting room for 3 full minutes, maybe longer. Time felt meaningless. Her hand rested on the door handle. Her heart tried to break through her ribs, to escape, to run. She could leave, turn around, walk back to her cell, tell Beatrice to send him home, to tell him it was a mistake, that his birth mother was dead or gone, or impossible to find. She could keep the door between them closed forever. But her hand pushed it open anyway. He stood when she entered. Tall, taller than she expected. Thin, like she'd been at that age. Those green eyes that were undeniably, impossibly hers. Sister Catherine. She couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything but stare at this boy who was her son, and a stranger in everything she'd tried to forget. He took a step forward, uncertain. I'm Daniel. She knew. God. She knew. I don't know what to say. His smile was nervous, beautiful, breaking. Me neither. They sat. The table between them felt like an ocean, vast and uncrossable. Silence stretched between them, filled with 16 years of questions neither knew how to ask. Finally, Daniel spoke, his voice cracking on the words. Did you mean it? The note. About praying for me every day. Catherine's throat burned. Every single day. Even when I tried to forget. Even when I thought I had no right. Every morning and every night. Your name was the first thing I said in prayer, and the last thing before sleep. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. I have a good life, great parents, a little sister I'd die for. I'm not here to mess anything up or make demands. I just needed to know. Catherine's chest cracked open. Then why are you here? He looked down at his hands, so young, so uncertain. Because my mom, my adoptive mom, she's sick, really sick, cancer. And last month she said something I can't stop thinking about. Catherine's stomach twisted. She said, you have your mother's eyes, both of them. Catherine froze. I didn't understand at first. I thought she meant you. But then I found the papers, and there were 2 names on the birth certificate. No, please, no. Catherine Reeves, mother, and Margaret Sinclair, legal guardian. The room spun. Catherine gripped the table, the wood solid and real beneath her palms. Margaret was your... ... Daniel nodded, tears streaming down his face now. My grandmother. She signed away her rights to the agency, said it was a family relinquishment. Both of you. Together. Catherine couldn't move, couldn't think, couldn't process what she was hearing. Margaret, her mentor, her shield, her mother, had known, had always known. I didn't know you knew her, Daniel continued, his voice soft. Not until my dad told me she passed last week. He said she'd been living here, at St. Mary's. That's when I realized you both came here, after me. Together. Catherine's hands covered her face. 16 years of silence, of separate cells, of separate prayers, of pretending they were mentor and student, nothing more. When the whole time, Margaret had been carrying the same secret, the same shame, the same unbearable, impossible love. She never told you, did she? Daniel's voice broke through her thoughts. Catherine shook her head, unable to speak. My mom, my adoptive mom, she met Margaret once, at the agency. She said Margaret cried the whole time, said she couldn't raise another child alone, that she'd already failed once, with you. Catherine's heart shattered. Failed. Margaret thought she'd failed her, when the truth was Catherine had never told her about the boy she got pregnant with at 17, the baby she couldn't keep. She'd hidden it, ashamed and terrified, and Margaret had found out anyway, and instead of anger, instead of judgment, she'd given up her grandchild, so Catherine wouldn't have to do it alone. The room, Catherine whispered, room for B, the key she left me. It wasn't just about you finding me. It was. Daniel reached across the table and placed a second envelope down. She left this too. My dad gave it to me yesterday. Said it was supposed to be delivered after she passed. It's addressed to you. Catherine's hands shook as she opened it. Inside, Margaret's handwriting, unsteady but determined. Catherine, forgiveness isn't something you earn, it's something you accept. I never told you I knew, because I wanted you to tell me when you were ready. But I see now you were waiting for permission that I should have given you years ago. So, here it is. You were 17. Scared, alone. You didn't fail. You survived. And I am so, so proud of you. Room for B was ours. I kept it locked because I knew someday you'd be ready to open it. And when you did, I wanted you to know you were never alone. Not then, not now, not ever. Love, always. Mom. Catherine folded the letter, her hands finally steady. Daniel watched her, waiting. I can't be your mother, she said quietly. His face fell. But I can be someone who knew you were loved from the very first moment. And if you want, if your parents are okay with it, I'd like to be someone you can write to. Someone who keeps praying. Every single day. Daniel's smile broke through his tears like sunrise. I'd like that. After he left, Catherine went back to room for B one final time. The shelf wasn't empty anymore. Margaret had left one more thing. A photograph. The two of them, years ago, before the convent, before the vows, before everything fell apart and was slowly rebuilt. Mother and daughter, smiling. Catherine pressed it to her chest. Thank you, she whispered to the empty room, to Margaret, to God, to whatever force had brought them all to this moment. The door stayed open this time. No more locks, no more buried rooms, just light, finally breaking through. We all have a room we keep locked, a memory we swore we'd bury, a name we don't say out loud. Maybe you're still holding the key, maybe someone's waiting on the other side, not to judge, not to blame, just to tell you you were never as alone as you thought. If you could unlock that door, what would you find?